Sandra?
China's President Xi wrapping his power trip to Russia, declaring that Beijing's bond with Putin is part of his plan for a new world order that does not include the U.S. or the rest of the West. Today, President Biden responding with a meeting of his own, heading to Canada to meet with Prime Minister Trudeau. Let's bring in Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz. He's a member of the Foreign Relations Committee and joins us now. Senator, great to have you on the program today. So you're sort of looking at something that perhaps the focus is not on in this moment of world leaders. What are you watching?
Well, Sandra, it's great to be with you. You know, I've got to say, we look at the last 2.5 years of the Biden administration's foreign policy, and it's been an absolute disaster. We've seen every enemy of America getting stronger. We've seen the Biden administration alienating our friends and allies and pushing them away. And right now we see Putin and Xi coming together, Russia and China, our two most formidable adversaries, coming together because of the Biden administration's weakness. Yesterday, Secretary of State Tony Blinken was testifying before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and I asked him about the Biden administration's incoherent foreign policy on the Ukraine war, which is specifically that the Biden administration has gone incredibly soft on Iran. It has waived sanctions on Iran. It just in the last few days waived sanctions, allowed a $500 million payment to go to the government of Iran. It's allowing the Ayatollah to sell 1 million barrels a day of oil in defiance of U.S. sanctions. And the money that's going to Iran, they're putting into drones that Russia is using to attack Ukrainian citizens, civilians, and soldiers. You have the Biden administration literally funding both sides of this war. It makes no sense. It's all political, and it is endangering the United States as a result of it.
So, Senator Cruz, one of the big questions that people have been rightly asking about this new bromance between President Xi and Putin is what does it mean from the world? What are the ramifications of this new axis of authoritarianism? Peter Doocy tried to ask the press secretary that question yesterday. Listen to this exchange.
Xi told Putin at their meeting, change is coming that hasn't happened in 100 years, and we are driving this change together. What do you think that means?
You would have to ask them.
You would have to ask them as the response. You would think that the White House would have some sort of reasoned foreign policy analysis about what the potential ramifications of this new alliance are.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of us have been pointing out that this was a likely consequence of Biden's foreign policy mistakes. You look at Russia, what caused the war in Ukraine is Biden came into office, and one of the very first things he did is he waived sanctions on Nord Stream 2, the undersea pipeline from Russia to Germany. I was the author of those sanctions. I wrote the law that passed the Congress with an overwhelming bipartisan vote that President Trump signed into law, and we had shut that pipeline down. Biden began his presidency by waiving those sanctions, giving a multi-billion-dollar gift to Putin and Russia. That weakness prompted Putin to invade Ukraine. Likewise, in China, this administration is fundamentally soft on China. Today's Democrat Party, sadly, is structurally pro-China. If you look at the biggest stakeholders behind Democrats today, big business, big tech, big Hollywood, big universities, all of them are in bed with China. And I'll tell you, last year there was a vote I forced on the floor of the Senate that was incredibly clarifying. I forced a very simple vote that said the United States government should not purchase electric vehicles or batteries manufactured using slave labor in concentration camps in China. Every single Democrat except one, every Democrat but Joe Manchin, voted no. And today, the Biden White House is the largest customer in the world purchasing the forced slave labor from those Chinese concentration camps.
And that is incredibly important to continue to highlight. Meanwhile, as we discuss all of this, Senator, President Biden's approval rating is falling to nearly the lowest of his presidency. 38% approve of Biden. The lowest point was 36% in July of 2022. But this is happening as the American people are watching how this administration is reacting to these growing threats. We'll get a final thought on that from you.
Well, look, unfortunately, we have a president who's not up to the task. He is not. His mental decline has been precipitous. And the White House is essentially being run by the children. It's being run by a bunch of left-wing activists. You know, I've been astonished. 11 years ago when I first arrived in the Senate, Joe Biden was vice president. Joe Biden swore me in. All of us in the Senate know Joe. The guy we know, I have no idea where that guy is. I think they have the old Joe Biden tied up in the basement of the White House because now he is unfortunately checked out and they've handed the agenda over to the radicals. The people driving the agenda right now are Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and AOC. And there used to be such a thing as a moderate Democrat. Sadly, today, there aren't any left. They've chased them out of their party. And the country's paying the price with the disastrous foreign policy and economic policy we're seeing right now.
Well,